the sixth part of the series called the State of Gender Equality, Gender Gaps, which is being organized by Gender Impact Studies Center at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, in partnership with Delhi Post News, GenDev Center for Research and Innovation, and CityMakers Mission International. Today we have something very interesting to talk on, and we have a very, in fact, renowned expert with us. The topic for today is promoting gender equality through public expenditure, understanding gender responsive budgeting. And we have with us Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, who is an adept social work practitioner, social researcher, and a gender expert with more than a decade of work experience at the grassroots level, academia, and international organizations. She specializes on issues of gender inequality, involuntary resettlement issues, and child rights issues. She has led programs on female feticide and infanticide issues in states like Rajasthan and MP, which are considered endemic on the issue. As a mission expert for UN Women, she has handheld the government of Nagaland to implement gender-responsive budgeting in their state policies. She has also engaged as a staff consultant social development specialist to Asian Development Bank, ADB, to work on resettlement and rehabilitation issues in state roads projects in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand 2007. She has been a UGC Fellow, GRF and SRF at the Department of Social Work, Jamia Millia Islamia, and a doctoral work is a unique empirical effort on understanding the perceptions of displaced women in one of Asia's largest SEZ, the Special Economic Zone. Her work is unique because she focused only on understanding 300 displaced women's perceptions for once. No one else has done that. She's currently associated with UN Women India office as a technical coordinator, gender responsive budgeting for the state of Manipur. Views expressed here are her personal, and she's not representing her office today. So friends, I think, we'll move over to Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar. So over to you, Dr. Sanghamitra.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Induji, for this warm welcome. And good morning, Govindji. It's nice to see you. And just to give a context on this subject, because I find this hashtag gender gaps a very interesting issue, because there are gaps in various facets of the society and the system. So today what I am proposing is something to do with the policy level. It's not to do with the community or the CSOs, because gender budgets are generally top down. So it's from the government, it's in the policy level. Although the policies are guided, because the gender plan is guided by the recommendations that the grassroots provides. So that's a circular relation they have. So today, as I had a discussion with Arjun, that we would have an introductory discussion on what exactly is GRB and how India is implementing it and what exactly is going on in today's time in the country. So starting with the, I'll just switch on the PPT. Let me know if it is visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. If you could do it, yeah.
Yeah, full screen. Yeah.
Okay. So primarily, I'll be giving a brief introduction. I'll be talking about the GRB nature and forms, and then I'll talk about the status of GRB and who does GRB. So to give the context, this is what we talk about, because the percentile of labor force participation between men and women is almost a gap of 26%, which is a huge number, and this is global. This is not just India, it is globally. And the proportion of employment in informal and unprotected developing regions is almost 75%, which means India comes under the developing country, but now we know the terms are changing. However, We fall in this one, wherein a large proportion of the women workforce is in the informal and unprotected section. Then we see the gender pay gap, which is almost 24%. These are all standard public information that we you can access in our UN Women websites also. And also the unpaid care and domestic work proportion between men and women is like 2.5% extra for women than men. So you can understand the gravity of the disparities that women go through, and hence there was a need identified that we need to have budgets which are talking about this thing, what do you call it, gender equality and women empowerment. So thus the goals of gender equality and women's empowerment are fundamental to the sustainable development goals as well. As we know, out of the 17 goals, we have the 5th goal, particularly for gender equality. And in that also, we have to understand that the financing for gender equality and women's rights is central to the sustainable development goals. Not just because in a layman's language, if we say कि औरतों के schemes के लिए पैसे होने चाहिए, that's not the fundamental of it. It's basically to integrate the women's situation, or to integrate the gap that women are facing by policy, through a policy level intervention, wherein financing is done for gender equality and women issues. Therefore, the investment investment in women empowerment is a prerequisite for building prosperous societies, and therefore national planning and budgetary allocation. That is the main priority for why GRB is required in any country. To give a very standard definition, GRB is, as per the OECD's definition, it is integrating a clear gender perspective within the overall context of the budgetary process through special processes and analytical tools with a view to promoting gender responsive policies. So what exactly does that mean? That we are having a gendered framework wherein we are trying to identify the gaps, and then we are trying to fill it up with analytical tools to prove that, okay, because of this gap, this is the lacuna that is created, and hence if we cover that, then automatically that problem is addressed. Therefore, GRB provides a tangible framework that can be used by a range of actors, both government and non-government, to assess the gender differentiated impacts of government budgets, identify gaps between policy commitments and resource allocations, as well as to assess the impact of macroeconomic and revenue policies on gender inequalities. So this is broadly the concept of GRB. And the framework that it follows is a 5-step index, wherein the first step is to analyze the situation of women and men, girls and boys in a given sector. Say, for instance, if I take agriculture, so then I will see what is the proportion of workforce and different other variables, and then we will assess on that on those parameters, and then we'll see whether it assesses the gender responsiveness and the gaps of the policies and programs and legislation. That's the second step. The third will be to assess the adequacy of budget allocation to implement gender sensitive policies and programs, which will be followed up, because once we implement something, we have to ensure that it has been it is meeting the whatever our intent was. So thus the monitoring comes in. So monitoring whether the money was spent as planned, what services were delivered, and to whom. Because sometimes we have this disparity as well. Sometimes just to meet a requirement, sometimes the fudging happens where the resource is allocated to somebody, but that is actually not the actual beneficiary that was meant, who was meant for it. Therefore, and thus the last step is to assess the impact of step one, which means the baseline was, say for instance, if the baseline was 5. So now after all these interventions, where has it reached? So that is where the fifth step is, and this is a very proven framework, wherein if we go by all these 5 steps in assessing a policy or designing a policy and implementing it, it always works, and it has worked in many other countries as well. Therefore, what is the and to break it down, the gender analysis is a multifaceted aspect, because the policy is influenced by the gender analysis, which but the gender analysis is little, what should I say, it is limited in today's time, because we do not have the disaggregated data which actually would have informed the gender analysis further and in a very much more concrete manner. Thus, that is a gap that we, because we use mostly the sample studies, we do not have a census data on that. Therefore, that is one of the limitations. So the other step, the gender analysis, therefore informs what the government's annual work plan and the budget, which results in the gender budget statement, because that's where the budget allocation is done, and then the service delivery happens and the assessment of the results. So as you can understand, it is not only circular, it has what should I say, to and fro kind of a relationship, and that's why it is very integral for having gender sensitive personnel in this kind of a analysis, because otherwise people might actually do a step and not understand that this step has a correlation to something else which needs to be addressed, and thus the gap happens. So globally, what are the GRB milestones? It actually started in the year 1985 in Australia, and which was later on adopted and discussed in the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995. Then India adopted it in 2005, and 2015 the SDGs have adopted a specific target goal, which is the 5C1 on public allocations and gender equality and women empowerment. And very recently in 2015, the Addis Ababa action agenda also talked about the financing sustainable development commitments to GRP. In India specifically, where we know that in 2001, there was a special reference made by the finance minister, by the then finance minister, on in the budget speech, which was followed by in 2003 by the cabinet secretary, recommending all ministries and departments on gender issues in their annual reports. So, which was because it was mandated, because it was an office order in 2014, the Ministry of Finance formed the expert group, and the interdepartmental coordination committee, not the committee, the coordination forum was also formed, and the need for the gender budget cell was recognized. Gender budget cell is the nodal cell which actually sees to the implementation of the GRB in the state, in specific departments, or if it is because it is department specific or ministry specific, so they will monitor what all policies have been are women gendered engendered basically. So 2005 formally India adopted GBC, and it was made mandatory for all union ministries and departments to form the GBCs, and the gender budget statement has been issued every year since then. So what exactly does the gender budget statement do comprise of? It has two parts. First part is where the 100% women specific schemes are discussed or implemented or designed, and the part B is where the 30% of the allocation is for women, or basically it is pro women. So any policy that we see, any government policy that we see, we can see whether it falls in part A or part B, or it does not fall in either of it. So then accordingly we can understand how gendered the ministry is, or the department is, on these subjects. So if I give a chronological progression of the GRB in this country, in 2007 the charter was formed. In 2010 the planning commission discussed about the women component in the plans. In 2012 the planning commission again formed the working group for developing guidelines. In 2013 the guidelines were issued for all the state level implementation, and the roadmap was built. And 2015 MWCD has what do you say, implemented the handbook, which actually guides all the state ministries on how it is to be done. So that has been the progression of the country. And in if we see ministry wise, union government ministry wise, Department of Science and Technology has specific, these are all part A policies. So we have fellowship schemes for women scientists, we have infrastructure support for women only universities, women technological park, biotechnological park. Then Department of Telecommunication has formed the Sanchar Shakti scheme. So that also is part A. Ministry of Home Affairs, special buses for women CRPF was introduced. Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gases also introduced the all Rajiv Gandhi Gramin LPG Vitrak. That is the scheme which was in joint ownership of women and men. So this is a part B policy. In state level, if we look into the state level initiatives, government of Kerala has formed gender friendly infrastructure schemes. Then we have counseling centers for victims of domestic violence in district hospitals. Then government of Gujarat has formed the Kanya Kelavani scheme. It's basically a women empowerment scheme. And then we have Chiranjeevi Yojana. Government of Maharashtra has the women helpline. Government of Rajasthan has the relaxation on registration fees. So property entitlement and all those things are addressed, where women have a concession on that. Government of Himachal has formed the recognition of deserted women as single women. So they have a pension scheme and all. Government of Tamil Nadu has policies for the incarcerated incinerators, the sanitary napkins burning system, which is introduced in the government schools near the toilet, girls' toilet. Then we have, and this is part A of the GBS. Then we have the training of school teachers on menstrual health. Then we have reservation for women in police forces. So two of the schemes are on reproductive rights. The other is on social security and security issues. Then we have government of Bihar, which has a bicycle scheme for it is also part of the SSA scheme. Then we have study tours for girls and boys in secondary schools for cross learning and all. Vocational training for Muslim girls. Then we have support for Muslim deserted women. So we have in Bihar, they have also tried to address the minority issues and of course the girls issues. So these are the as of now, these are the current schemes in different states that are existing. The rest of the states have not been able to like, they don't have that kind of schemes now, but there is work going on. So very soon other states will also be able to I hope formulate this kind of schemes. However, the challenges of GRB in India, and in fact for that matter globally also, are in three areas: systemic, knowledge, and accountability. So systemic challenges are like the set timeline becomes a hindrance, because it has to be GBS, as we all know, is coterminous to the union budget. So whatever state plans have to be made, that has to be tabled in the state legislation before the budget. So time period is very less, because most of the time, as we are aware, it budgets are mostly in the first quarter or second quarter of the year, early second quarter or first quarter of the year. So the planning and the discussion has to happen in the last quarter of the previous year. So in government settings, it becomes a little of a issue, because most of the time transfers happen and all those things happen. So if you have trained a personnel, that personnel might as well get transferred to another department. So that is a huge issue that that we face. Therefore the timeline, the set timeline has to be a bit relaxed, or maybe some innovative things can be thought about it. And the other very, very crucial aspect is involving CSO. CSO involvement is very limited, because it is by invitation, because they are part of the, what do you call it, the expert panel. And until and unless you are invited for it, you cannot participate. You can, of course, write in public domain about what all schemes and what all policies you would want related to women's empowerment and gender equality. And if you are invited by the state departments or the government, then you can keep your ideas to it. Otherwise the involvement is very, very one-sided. But the CSO खुद से अपने आप panel में जाके नहीं बैठ सकता until and unless they are invited for it. And there is a lack of interdepartmental coordination. Why do we find it problematic? Because say for instance agriculture है और उसके साथ में horticulture है, but these are two different departments, right? And they are guided by different personnel. So if team A is formulating a plan which is gendered, and team B is also formulating a plan which is gendered, but and is very much aligned, if they went together, there was more chances that it would get passed. But because they are all separate, so the coordination is not there. तो मैंने क्या प्लान बनाया और आपने क्या प्लान बनाया, हम दोनों को नहीं पता. हमने टेबल किया because it goes to the finance department, and उनका डिस्क्रिप्शन होता है कि कितना परसेंट वो अलॉट करेंगे, राइट? So that becomes a huge issue, because there is no coordination between the departments, the line departments. So that is an issue. The knowledge management aspect, as I earlier pointed out, sex disaggregated data है नहीं आज के डेट में, and that becomes a big challenge when you are trying to form policies for a specific group of people. So that is a challenge. The other is low understanding about the outcome matrix of the gendered budgeting. Because if you are forming a policy or a scheme, उसको 3-4 steps होंगे. So outcome output वाला जो parameter है, वो is based on the baseline of what the situation was. क्योंकि segregated data नहीं, disaggregated data नहीं है, तो हमने जो भी form किया है, it is most of the time we are basing our ideas on the sample data that we have. So that itself is a challenge. And when we do not have an understanding about the outcome parameter, then whatever we are designing, ultimately वो उसमें realize हुआ कि नहीं, वो questionable हो जाता है, या वो उतना address नहीं हो पाता है. So that is a huge aspect that we need to work on. Then there's a lack of gender understanding among the officials on the who are part of the gender who are part of the budgeting processes. So कुछ लोगों को ये लगता है कि gender का मतलब सिर्फ औरत. That becomes a huge trouble when you are planning a state plan. And if the personnel who is part of that team does not have the sensitivity to understand what exactly does gender mean, तो उसमें as all of us can understand, that becomes a huge challenge. The last aspect is accountability. No compliance or performance audit system is there to monitor it. जैसे हम लोग कोई भी एक प्लान करते हैं, कोई भी स्कीम बनाते हैं या कोई भी एक system in place रखते हैं, then we always have a compliance monitoring system. लेकिन in this policy or in this methodology, that is missing as a mandate. It is discretion of the state whether they will have it, but it is not mandated. So that becomes a little troublesome, because फिर वो miss हो जाता है and people are not accountable for it, so they don't take it that they don't understand the gravity of it. Then there is a lack of legislation review. So obviously, because अगर आपने कोई एक स्कीम किया है या कोई एक पॉलिसी पे आप बात कर रहे हो और उसका आपका review system is not in place, then it becomes a very defunct kind of a situation. Civil society and community pressure in GRB formation is lacked, obviously, because their participation is very much dependent on whether you are invited or not. And at times, low political will and commitment is also found in some places, and that creates a gap. So that becomes a challenge. So fundamentally, what exactly is GRB? GRB is not. What GRB is not is, it is not a separate budget for women. It is not about spending the same on women and men. It is not just about assessing program targeted specifically at women and girls. But what is it actually? GRB is actually an initiative which has diverse efforts aimed at making government's planning, budgeting, and auditing contribute to the gender equality. So it's a all encompassing aspect. It is not just the male female segregation only. The, and what does it do? It analyzes differential impact of policies and budgets on women and men, as well as on other axes of the social discrimination. So when we are talking about GRB, we actually are not isolating the third gender. We are also trying to bring in that gender wherever they fit, they deem fit. So we are not isolating, or rather, we are not ousting anybody out. We are all encompassing, and we are trying to bring in everyone in this discussion, in this debate. And we are not primarily, ये सिर्फ men women different budget ऐसा नहीं है. It's basically we are trying to mainstream the gender the budget with gendered perspective. So this is what is GRB in a very layman's language, and most of the time it is done by the specific departments, all line departments, and in most of the states it is the in union it is obviously MWCD who is the nodal. In states, most of the time it is women and child, or it is social welfare. And in one case, when I was in Nagaland, so the Nagaland case, planning and coordination was the nodal. So that is also very interesting. Why? Because who is part of the planning process? So if MWCD is part of the, if women and child is part of the planning process and has a say in the overall discussion, then there is a, as we can understand, there is a power equation where your say will be taken seriously. So in Nagaland, because planning was the nodal, so they were able to quickly get many things done, like formation of the GBC and all those things. But so I'm not saying that the other departments being nodal is any problem. It's basically about the willingness and the support that is provided by the experts on this subject, which helps in building the GRB scene in the state. So as of now, there are mostly women and child is nodal in the states, or it is um, social welfare, and at times it is co-shared by finance also. And if finance is part of the discussion, then it always becomes very fast and effective for that state. So I will end it here. Thank you. If anybody has any questions or any doubts on any of the slides, kindly please let me know.
Yeah. In fact, thanks a lot, Dr. Sanghamitra,
Yeah.
for this very interesting presentation, which was, precise, to the point, and I think brief. So we have ample time also. And I think the fact that he brought out as to why gender responsive budgeting is key to gender equality and gender empowerment,
Yes.
and how actually the grassroots plans lead to policy, and the policy leads to gender budgeting. I think
Exactly.
that linkage is very important.
Yes.
And I think in how the GRB, the gender responsive budgeting spoke about, is linked to the SDGs, and why it's important also that this is what we talk about internationally as well. And India is, part of the international movement, part of the international campaign of gender equality and gender empowerment. So I think you
Yeah.
brought this aspect very well. And surely, I think, also in terms of, you spoke about the gender gaps and all, as to how the GRB is a tool to bridge the gaps, you know, um,
Yes.
and in fact, and then how it's actually, a mechanism whereby the governments of a particular country, and especially here India, the central and the state governments, over the period of time from 2000 onwards, have been able to, make specific efforts towards this, which I think is very interesting. And then also, I suppose, I think what was important was, I think, the challenges that you mentioned here at the systematic level, then at the knowledge management level, and at the accountability level. And I think before I throw it open, I would have surely Govindji come in here, and other friends also. But I just want to say here that, like, we all know for sure that different departments have got budgets for women's programs. You
Yeah.
mentioned part A and part B, very
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. And so different departments will be having part A and part B allocations. So when we have part A and part B allocations, why isn't that the different departments converge on the part A and part B as such, which you mentioned about the interdepartmental coordination? And the problem is this kind of interdepartmental coordination, this convergence, which should happen at the central union level, is missing, and which should happen at the state level is also missing. And that's the reason why the gaps that we have in a country, due to resources, keeps on increasing. So maybe if you have got certain ways and means, or maybe if you've got certain inputs about different countries as to how they have been able to converge, from which India can learn. So maybe you can bring in those experiences also. And I think one important facet you mentioned was also that that there is a involvement of civil society is limited, and which I suppose, like during this COVID times, we all have seen as to how, apart from the governments, both the union and the state, civil society played a major role. They were up there, and it was because of civil society that much of the government phase got saved. Throughout the country, the migrants working, everything going here and there. I think so. The civil society plays a very important role. So what is it that you think that maybe at the government end, we need to make systems more amenable to the civil society's participation as such. So maybe if there is some, and then maybe again, if you have got some examples from different countries whereby how the civil society plays a very active role in like I think Brazil is one country where they used to talk about budgeting and all, like, in big way, public audits and all that. So that was, I think, something which I was keen. And then of course, I think what gender budgeting is and what it is not. I think so. In a way, it was a very, very crisp and a very clear presentation. Thank you for that. So I'll now hand it over to Govindji and other friends, Semi and Arjun, for your questions, and other participants who are there to also ask questions that you think you require for clarification. Thank you for this interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
And sorry that you're coughing and we are making you talk. Sorry for that,
Not a problem. Actually, I had already committed for this date. So I told Arjun yesterday evening only. That, "Dekho, I am having severe cough. I'm taking a lot of medicine, but please excuse my voice tomorrow. But I can't help it."
Oh,
Yeah.
no. And despite
Yeah.
that, you made an excellent presentation. Govindji,
Thank
over to
you.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, go with you.
Thank you, Sanghamitra. Huh?
Thank you.
It is a pleasure listening to you. Huh? It was really such a kind of, I don't have to add anything. I mean, you have explained a very complex issues in very understandable, lucid form. Huh? That is the kind of what it is, when it was started, and bringing the international and national situation. You also talked very well about its achievements and the challenges as much as possible, kind of thing, because I know you and women would have some limitations. So, to what extent you can talk about the challenges, but you did mention that. So, this is really art which I appreciate and learn from you. That how some complex issues are made easy. That would be the one thing that I highly appreciate. But what is really, I wanted to say that I've never worked on gender budgeting, but as part of some kind of thing when I was in UNIFEM and UN Women, and some experts were invited even from the outside, Bandelier, for example. So there are two things that bother me, that why there is a limited pressure by civil society. In my understanding, civil society, first thing that is also really influenced, maybe unknowingly or unconsciously, about social norms. So why do women have its own resources? Why there is a need for that? Oh, women should be empowered, they should be done this and they should be do that kind of thing. Because of my study and land rights, I've often seen this kind of thing, that when it comes to we skirting around the situation, okay, but effective in terms of that how much it should be done. So lack of monitoring and social norms. These are the two things that are the, and where except some women's organizations, not enough pressure has been generated from our own movement also, that this has, except in the initial, gender budgeting should be there. And if some friends, when I talked and when this was done, including in the Department of Science and Technology and Energy later, that the women who were given, the women colleagues of the ministries who were given the responsibility for doing the gender work. March 8th, for example, having tea and dinner was partly introduced as gender budgeting. It was so funny at that kind of thing. Of course, I know now I can talk about these things, but at that time it was impossible to. Now,
However, now we have had a lot of changes because we now pick up thematic issues. So last year it was on one issue. So this year we are already planning on another issue.
yeah.
So like your time was the initial stages. So probably they were probably soul searching how to go about it, and by now they have now come to a consensus कि भैया इसको ऐसे handle करना है. So
That's right.
probably they have
And this
now.
was the frustration shared by the women colleagues, women members who were there, kind of thing. They were, so that was the one thing. Second was also, I was thinking, what percentage of the allocation of the resources of a particular ministry are there in gender budgeting? Do we have this kind of data available? This is the, I mean, it was considered at 1.5% of something. It was very little, not 5% of the total resources, 5% what is considered for the social kind of thing. So that was the one thing that is, so, and third thing that was pointed out, and I think it might still continue, but since you work in Nagaland, so that would be a little different, because the Northeast leads a lot of attention. The mainstreaming of Northeast that was introduced in the earlier government it has continued, because they want to really quite in the whole region and all this. That particularly on ST.
And in fact now,
SC, scheduled caste.
in fact now we have also brought in Manipur. So now I'm leading the Manipur hand holding also.
Right. Okay.
So we are trying to integrate northeastern states in every project or program that we design.
Mhm.
And in this current program where I am associated, I am leading the Manipur part. So northeast, one of the vital states are part of it.
Yeah. But how, what extent it is really gone to the women, Dalit feminist? Okay, that would be the kind of thing. These are the questions inhibited, and probably I know institutional limits. So I'm not really, this is not the question that, the general question I'm raising, not to you and women. Of
This
course,
is this
I
is
have
this is
tremendous
this is for a personal discussion. Yes, I understand.
these need to be the, in terms of the percentage allocation of the resources, 90% of the resources, maybe the picture is changed in this ministry or in this kind of period, but 90% of the resources are Ministry of Women and Child Development were going for children, and only 10%, maybe it is a bit changed now, but this
More
was
or less, no, more or less is the same
same
thing.
kind of thing. So look
So
at that kind of situation.
we are trying to segregate. We are trying to tell that women and child should not be taken
Yeah,
together.
right.
It has to be separate.
So these are
That
some
is the
things
conversation
that
we are
come in gender budgeting, and maybe they have led a kind of disappointment. So social norms and disappointment both converge in this kind of thing. That social norms and the general kind of situation, that why do women need independence of their own? They should be included kind of thing when it comes to economic resources, particularly. And second is about this kind of that people who are working there, and what kind of allocation of the resources and for what purpose it is being used. That would be the
yeah,
these are the some concern, these are the future challenges that we have to.
exactly.
Thank you very much, but once I
Thank
really
you.
appreciated your presentation so much.
Thank you, sir.
Uh,
It was actually a huge presentation. I tried to cut it down because the issue, what I had a conversation with Arjun, I understood that there will be people who have no idea about GRP. So I wanted to explain the first stages of GRP. So that's why I have cut it down to a short presentation. Otherwise, I could have gone into the budgeting and financial part of it, which doesn't make sense to this
yes.
audience. So that's why I have avoided
But
that.
however short,
And
it is very, very comprehensive.
thank you so much. And Induji, actually, I did not bring in most of the other countries' perspective, because other countries are having a little bit of changed nature. So हमारे साथ ना वो match नहीं होता है. So just for the sake of example, if we use it, it does not hold good, because say for instance, Sri Lanka has implemented it. Timor-Leste has implemented it. There are other countries who are implementing, as you said, Brazil, and there are many other countries. But their nature of the system of implementation and the governance is different. So, हम अगर इसको as it is उठाएंगे, तो it does not fit into the bracket that we are trying to discuss on. So that's why I've just given the global milestone. I will share some resources on the global part with Arjun and the team. You all can definitely benefit from understanding more how they have done it. So that way, I hope that answers your query.
I think Bangladesh is also doing very well.
Bangladesh is doing, yes.
Kind of shines.
But Govindji, actually in Bangladesh there are other factors also. For instance, हमारे जो self-help वाला जो aspect है वहाँ का, that has been so profound and so exemplary. Automatically, the sensitivity regarding gender aspects is very pronounced. So automatically, the work is in a different tangent. So other factors have affected the GRB implementation in that country, and which is a very good thing. So yeah, Bangladesh is a very good example of GRB.
And other indicators also now, Bangladesh has done so well now. So now it is.
I'm largely because they are small countries and coordination is easy.
नहीं, ये actually excuse होता है, ये एक excuse होता है. This is an excuse in my understanding, because छोटा हो बड़ा हो, अगर मैंने plan किया है federal, I'm talking about federal states, right? If all the federals have implemented it in a right way, then छोटा हो या बड़ा हो, it does not matter. So that is in my understanding. Of course, it's in economic understanding, it is said that it is a small country, hence implementation is good. But me being an implementer and an application-based person, I feel that it is not true, because if every federal state does it right, even for a country as diverse as India, we can do it. So the Kerala as a state has done it, isn't it? So वो एक बहुत ही sad सा reality है हमारे country का.
Of course, we had a talk with an expert in Bangladesh and one with Sri Lanka also. I really asked them on this perspective that what do you think that the regions close to you are not growing? So in their view, this federal structure, having a lot of bottlenecks, that problem is also for CSOs, I would say, that coordinating in one state or to another becomes really tough for them due to very different institution. But yes, we have to do it.
And CSOs because I have been associated with NGOs for a long time, I feel वो जो coordination है ना और जो cooperation होना चाहिए inter CSOs, वो भी थोड़ा सा limited है, because I know for a fact there are many grassroots organizations who are doing exemplary work in those states. लेकिन आप अगर mainstream करते हो तो आपको दिखता है कि इस टाइप पे कोई काम ही नहीं हो रहा, जबकि हो रहा है. But they are so isolated and they are so focused on their work, and they have not been able to bring their say to the public domain. Hence, they are very isolated. So, वो एक limitation थी, तो उसका भी बिल्कुल है.
Yes, ma'am. इसी को with leadership of Govind ma'am and Indu sir, because Indu sir is really NGO expert, ma'am is top researcher. We are trying to call all these people in our gender gaps, so that we can have some knowledge of what is going on in some detailed manner from themselves only, not by learning. Simi, would you like to add a few points? I have many comments, but if you want to go.
Yes,
And
yes.
what we will do, we will collect few questions, then you can choose to answer.
Perfect.
Yeah. Great. So I don't have a comment. Thank you very much, Indu sir, Govind ma'am, and Dr. Dhar. It was so informative and very, very precise, and I really commend you for such a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My query is that when you listed the various GRB examples in different states, in Bihar, in other states like Chiranjeevi and all those schemes. So, yes, examples of schemes of gender responsive budgeting. Correct. So, as you also mentioned
it is not example of GRB. It is example of part A, part B. जो हमने बजट की बात करी ना, उसमें मतलब जो part A को follow कर रहा है या part B को follow कर रहा है. So those are the cases statewide where this has been implemented.
Correct. Thank you for putting it correctly. So as you also mentioned that there is a huge amount of interdepartmental and interministerial coordination with Ministry of Women and Child Development. Yes.
Lacking. Yeah, it's lacking.
It's lacking, correct.
Yeah.
So, we have seen how the new education policy of 2020, it has just left out sex education at school level. So how about taking this up in as one of either part A, part B, and in any ways, how can we have this as part of in any manner as part of the GRB? This was one of my query, and we have some questions that have come up. If that is possible, and if it is possible, then how can we go ahead with it?
Actually, I will not want to comment on the policy, because that is something that requires a lot of discussion. And what I would just talk to you through the GRB lens is education policy, or this kind of a holistic policy is always part A or part B. It has to be, क्योंकि वहाँ पे male female दोनों साथ में है ना? The population, both the populations are part of it. So automatically it becomes part B. If the allocation is lesser, around 30%, then it becomes part B. If it is 100%, then it becomes part A. So education policy में allocation क्या है, वो आपको फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल देखना पड़ेगा. अगर if I'm looking through a GRB lens, then I'll see what has been the allocation, and where you are talking the contentious part and all, those will be part of review. But if I'm looking at it as a GRB person, then I'll only see what is the allocation allotted. कि मतलब आज अगर हम एजुकेशन सेक्टर की बात करें, so we know for a fact that India's education level is questionable, although we are seeing not many good data. There are a lot of improvement, but then the question lies with quality. Quality education is an aspect that is always challenged. And I've been part of Pratham in my initial career. So असर और ये सारा जो हम लोग सर्वेस करते थे, we actually know how what is the level of the child in a rural area of reading, writing, and speaking whatever language we are, and plus plus India's association with English education is a huge aspect, which somehow we are not coming out of. Although I myself am speaking in English, but never mind. This is a forum where we can. But the issue is, आप अगर एजुकेशन का स्टेटस देखोगे केरला का या किसी भी साउथ कंट्री का, साउथ स्टेट का, और आप एजुकेशन लेवल देखोगे किसी नॉर्थ स्टेट का, रैंडमली आप कोई भी सैंपल उठाते हो एंड यू मेक दैट एनालिसिस. आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द असर डेटा. असर का जो डेटा है उसको अगर आप दोनों को साथ में रखेंगे और देखेंगे, उसमें डिस्पैरिटी बहुत मैसिव बना है, बहुत मैसिव है. Why? Because first of all, the child or the pupil is not conversant in whatever language I am trying to force feed the child in the northern belt, and in the south they are very clear कि भैया हमारा first language जो भी है वही उसी पे stick करेंगे. There will be a third language or a second language. So that has actually been a positive for it. But education policy per se पे मैं comment इसलिए नहीं कर पाऊंगी because that is something, as you can understand. But
Yes, correct.
as I told you, the GRB वाला जो parameter है, जो index है, that is part A, part B वाला अगर आप देखोगे, so you'll just have to check what is the allocation made. Has it been totally women specific, or is it pro women? If it is pro women, which means 30% and above होगा, और अगर वो fully focused on women होगा, तो automatically that will be 100%, which is not possible, obviously, क्योंकि यहाँ पे इसका मतलब तो ये होगा कि एजुकेशन मेन को चाहिए ही नहीं, ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता ना. बॉयज एंड मेन आल्सो नीड एजुकेशन. So education policy will be something which will be part B of GRB lens. Yeah. Does it answer your query?
Yes, actually, my this was really wonderfully answered. My question was more about sex education at school level. This has not been taken up.
अभी का जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है उस पे वो सवाल है ना. So we
yeah,
it's better not
yeah. Sure, no problem.
Yeah, so that is the theoretical thought process that they go by, or the moral index they go by, that is affecting it. Although I will also add one thing, Simi, there are not many policies in a different level that are addressing lot many issues on sex education. So मतलब ये जो हम बात करते हैं ना कि इंटर डिपार्टमेंटल कोऑर्डिनेशन नहीं है, तो बेसिकली एजुकेशन एचआरडी वाला जो डिस्कशन जिन्होंने ये पैनल, जिस एक्सपर्ट पैनल ने ये बनाया होगा, उन्होंने बाकी लोगों को देखा नहीं होगा शायद. आई एम नॉट क्रिटिकिंग एनीबॉडी, आई एम जस्ट सेइंग दैट somewhere it shows the lack of coordination, because this current administration has worked a lot on women issues. There is no denial to that. ठीक है, लेकिन अगर ऑल ऑफ अ सडन पूरे एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में आपने सेक्स एजुकेशन पर से हटा दिया और उसको मतलब इस तरह से वो किया है, तो दिस इज सम गैप. तो वो एक एस्पेक्ट है.
Sure. Thank you so much.
That is also lack of hard work and research. And no one wants
no comments on that.
Usually because there is no time for so many of different things. That is why, anyways, ma'am, let me first congratulate you Despite having bad throat, you came here and gave very comprehensive, very rightly, so that everyone can make sense. I would also urge you to give some practical experience that how it is being done. For example, in Manipur, 5,000 is the budget. So how मतलब उसको कैसे कर रहे हैं in process? मैं कुछ और ऐड कर देता हूँ मैम इसी में. Then you can, yes. और उस प्रोसेस में कैसे सीएसओ और सबको इंटीग्रेट कर रहे हैं, जो बजट की प्रोसेस है, अगर उस पर भी थोड़ा फॉर द benefit of practitioners and researchers. Other than that, ma'am, there are many schemes, as you are rightly mentioning. Our national government schemes, Ujjwala, Jan Dhan Yojana, Swachh Bharat Mission, SHGs, annual. In fact, all of the schemes are going gendered, if I can say. Most of our national scheme, Har Ghar Jal Nal, Jal Jeevan Mission, any schemes we take up, really, even Mudra scheme, Narega also have, 60% women beneficiary. But one thing which, but that's also not a very, I would say, good question. That then there is, when we are increasing the number of schemes or policies, then there is also what we call good governance, that we have to have less number of schemes. This dilemma is often coming because we are keep on increasing the scheme, and then it becomes an administrative issue also. And so whenever we take these issues in planning terms, or even we say that for that, I would just add, I just wrote a paper on data, and ma'am, you really highlighted so many things in EPW. I took technology and everything. I really forgot to add up on gender there. That is also my really so many things. I tried to take artificial intelligence, this, that, everything. Technology also.
See, Arjun, it is not only your, it's not your fault per se. It's basically gender comes as an afterthought for most people. So, मतलब उसके बारे में करने का मतलब additional headache. अरे यार वो segregated data कहाँ से निकालो ये वो. These are the thoughts that go on in a researcher's mind when they are writing an academic paper. तो उसमें फिर gender वाला part आपने जिस तरह से बोला कि artificial intelligence is something that is trending, that is upcoming, that is the future of the discussion. So you integrated that, but gender is something I can not because I'm a gender person, but gender is something that is cross-cutting, that will be across all discussions. And if people are not realizing it, it is something that, and that is one of the reasons the policy is not comprehensively or successfully been implemented. क्योंकि आपने एक पूरा population को ignore कर दिया है. It's almost a 50% of the population which you have ignored in the discussion. So that's why we always try to say कि कुछ भी चीज पे बात कर रहे हो, bring in the gender perspective. You are completing the circle. So ये तो बिल्कुल ये बात है.
Ma'am, let me just add. But this was really the policy planning part. On the impact part, I would say we have Nirbhaya Fund, we have so many, and most of the things what we are discussing is really very strong affirmative policy. Affirmative action policy, as in US we say, in our terms reservation. What do you think that all these policies, Nirbhaya Fund not being used, then if we come to the implementation rightly, there is nothing. And when we see this, then be it public sector, be it private sector, I would so, be it CSOs. I mean, you highlighted in your earlier slides that what is the workforce participation difference and all those rate pay gap. So essentially, it's 90-10 ratio typically in our workforce. What do you think, in your view, that those affirmative action policy or reservation should be there, especially in the private sector, to make an impact? And really, we have so much of backlogs to fill. Why only political reservation? Because Kelkar's ma'am work is also my work also on housing, PMAY, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So women के name पे आप register तो कर दे रहे हैं, फिर कुछ हो नहीं रहा है. So really that is not leading to things, and our be it rural or urban workforce, women participation is really decreasing. So what do you think of all these affirmative policies? Is there any scope in our state governments? And what can be done in terms of reforms, especially at local level, state level, or be it at organizational level, to push this agenda of gender responsive budgeting? We have National Commission of Women, State Commission of Women, this body, that body, but really not any body that has teeth to implement gender responsive budgeting. So is there a need at a macro level, and what can be the reforms at the ground or local level which can be constituted to internalize and institutionalize this process of GRBs? And ma'am, if you can give the example of process कि कैसे हम ये करते हैं, जिस state में भी कर रहे हैं, for the benefit. I have few more questions, but I will stop here.
I'll start with the first one, the Manipur one that you have asked for. Very technically, if I say, Manipur is the newest state which has adopted the GRB mandate. तो अभी हम लोग उनको हेल्प कर रहे हैं कि आप फर्स्ट स्टेप क्या लोगे, तो स्टेप बाय स्टेप आई एम गाइडिंग देम. तो अभी जैसे GRC बन रहे हैं, जेंडर बजट सेल्स बन रहे हैं उनके हर डिपार्टमेंट पे, and then they will, because the budget is coming up very soon next year, so we are also simultaneously trying to work on that, because the state plans will affect the budget statement. तो उसमें हम लोग पार्ट ए पार्ट बी दोनों ही देखेंगे. However, this is what I will not be able to give you the numbers per se, because numbers are something which are not for public discussion, right? Until the state has announced it, until वो अगर आप GBS पे डिस्कशन पर डेटा देखना चाहते हो, अगर आपको जेंडर बजट स्टेटमेंट्स देखने हैं, then there is an organization called CBGA. उनका आप अगर वेबसाइट चेक करोगे, उनके पास वो सारे स्टेट्स जो भी पब्लिक डोमेन में है, वो सारे के एनालिसिस एंड उसके स्टेटमेंट पब्लिक डोमेन में रहते हैं. और अदरवाइज यू गो स्टेट वाइज एंड access their websites and find out the information. Otherwise, CBGA is a very good resource where you get all the state circular budget circulars. तो ये आपका एक रिसोर्स हो गया. दूसरी बात ये होती है, आपने दूसरा क्या पूछा, अफर्मेटिव एक्शन वाला ना. So Arjun, it actually probably it is my personal view that I feel still policies are less. मतलब आप बोल रहे हो कि पॉलिसीज बहुत सारे बन जा रहे हैं, मेरा मानना ये है कि पॉलिसीज स्टिल आर लेस बिकॉज दे हैव नॉट बीन एबल टू इम्पैक्ट. आप मैंने जो बात करी ना, आउटकम इंडेक्स वाला जो हमको देखना है, आउटकम्स आए नहीं है किसी. अगर आप नरेगा की बात कर रहे हो, मैं उससे पहले जाती हूँ PMGSY स्कीम, यू नो दैट प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना जो थी, कनेक्टिंग द फर्देस्ट विलेज. I have been a consultant with ADB for reviewing that, and I can tell you for a fact that that scheme was exemplary policy, because that really connected to, मतलब ऐसा लगता है ना दुनिया end हो गई है, इसके बाद दुनिया है नहीं. And that village has around, if I give an example of MP में मैं furthest गई थी from Bhopal to Amarkantak. And that was, we crossed a river, we crossed, obviously because it's a mountainous area, so we crossed those terrains also. And when we reached those tribal villages, hamlets actually, there were like 5, 6, 7 hamlets, houses in that hamlet at one portion. Again, आगे जाओ, फिर आपको. लेकिन in that policy, you were to address each and every affected party. So what does that mean? अगर मैं GRB के लेंस से देखूं, तो that was completely a part B policy, because उन्होंने दोनों को देखा था. Affected party was not just the men, affected party was both of them. So अगर women headed household था, तो वो भी affected party था, तो उसको भी हमको address करना था. And as you must be very much aware, ADB का जो manual है on gendered aspect is very diverse and very comprehensive. So उसमें सारे ये aspects को address किए गए थे. So if you look at policies मतलब per policy अगर आप देखोगे, there are very many different parameters through which you can actually assess. So affirmative action is something which is very crucial and very much needed, because we go in today's time, we are living in an equity approach. you know that women's issues have not been addressed. तो इक्विटी तो रहेगा ही ना, अभी तो इक्वालिटी की बात दूर है, अभी तो हम पहले इनको एक लेवल तक चढ़ा ले, उसके बाद बात करेंगे ना डिफरेंसेस की. तो there are people who will sometimes say, oh, you are a feminist, but how come you want a separate seat in the bus? There is no correlation to that. मैं feminist हूँ, लेकिन अगर मैंने पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट यूज किया है और वहाँ पे कोई अब्यूसिव बिहेवियर है, उसको अवॉइड करने के लिए अगर मेरे लिए सेपरेटेड सीट्स है, where is the harm in that of accessing that? I'm giving you a very simplistic example. So same way, अगर हम बात करें, there are many safety issues that are not been addressed. तो अगर आप स्कीम की बात करो, रिसेंट में अगर हम बात करें, वो जो I'm forgetting the name, but where the LPG gases were given to the rural villages, है ना? तो वो that was a huge success when I was in Nagaland. It was a huge success because there are villages in those remote areas जिन्होंने कभी देखा ही नहीं है कि सिलेंडर क्या होता है, कैसे वो fuel यूज होता है. So they loved it and they actually have used it very extensively. Second round भी वहाँ पे अच्छे से, मतलब it has become a mainstream for them now. So in a way, environmentally अगर आप देखो, being if I'm analyzing a scheme, I will look into the other aspects also. So environmentally also this is something which is good. Plus, because the entitlement was for the women, and in Northeast mostly all the cooking and all the housework is done by the women, although there are few states which are matriarchal, लेकिन फिर भी काम जो होता है ना हाउसहोल्ड वाला, वो औरत ही करती है, उसमें कोई so called power dynamics चीज नहीं होता है. So that was there. So there are schemes, मतलब आप अगर कोई भी particular, if you want me to assess a particular scheme, you can give me that name. You look at any scheme and you will see these segregation. Until and unless you have identified that, until and unless हमको पता है सोशल ऑडिट्स हुए थे नरेगा, उसमें कितने डिस्क्रिपेंसीज निकले थे, है ना? तो वो सारा जो एस्पेक्ट्स है, those are something that we need to understand when we are analyzing a scheme. And GRB किस लिए वाइटल है? क्योंकि ये पॉलिसी लेवल से आ रहा है. आप नीचे से तो काम कर ही रहे हो, एनजीओ तो कर रही है, और बाकी डिसेंट्रलाइज सिस्टम्स भी काम कर रही है, लेकिन आप पॉलिसी लेवल पे टॉप डाउन अगर देखोगे तो वहां पे अंडरस्टैंडिंग या विलिंगनेस काफी टाइम चैलेंज होता है. तो आज अगर जीआरबी इज मेड अ मैंडेट and is made a compulsory aspect of every union department, it's a huge win for the gender inequality debate or the forum. So ये एक in my understanding, and that's public acceptance also to this, that there's no denial that this is a need of the hour, and we have to understand that affirmative action is to stay until and unless those gaps are identified. Implementation is a different aspect of it. आपने पॉलिसी बनाया लेकिन आपने इम्प्लीमेंटेशन वाले एस्पेक्ट में मॉनिटरिंग ढंग से रखा नहीं, तो ऑब्वियसली वो डिफंक्ट हो जाता है ना. तो मतलब इफ आई एम एन एनजीओ पर्सन, आई विल नाउ लॉबी कि भैया आपने पॉलिसी तो बना दी. से फॉर इंस्टेंस व्हाट मैं बस सेइंग कि एजुकेशन पॉलिसी अगर है, आपने पॉलिसी बना दिया, उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कहाँ होगा? स्कूल्स में होंगे, उसके अदर एजुकेशनल सिस्टम्स में होंगे, नॉन फॉर्मल है, फॉर्मल है, जो भी है सब में होंगे. तो उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कैसा हो रहा है, उसको मॉनिटरिंग कौन करेगा? इफ एनजीओ टेक अप दैट डिस्कशन and are strict about sharing the information with unbiased thought, then automatically everybody, all the stakeholders automatically gear up कि भाई अच्छा इस पे काम करना है. अभी अगर हम जीआरबी की बात करें, जीआरबी has multi-level stakeholders, primary, secondary, tertiary. तो हम लोग जो ये डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं, this is a tertiary stakeholder, because you and I am doing part of it, because I am part of the body which works on it. Otherwise, जैसे अगर हम लोग सारे सिर्फ उस पर बात कर रहे होते, तो we are the academicians or the researchers who are trying to affect that discussion. So we become the tertiary stakeholders. लेकिन हम अगर इसकी बात करें, affirmative actions की बात करें, it is, in my understanding, it is very very vital and very very much needed, क्योंकि अभी वो address हुआ नहीं है अभी तक. That's my take on it. Yeah. और कोई question था आपका?
Yes, मैं पूछ रहा था कि how does private sector takes it, because really government, if we include all state, local, and also the CSOs, only 1/4 of the workforce, or let us say, how the private sector is taking it, how they can contribute on this, or what is their role, because they have a major role to play. Yes.
In GRB?
Yes. I mean, GRB is also for
gender. देखिए, gender equality issue पे है, क्योंकि private sector के केस में अगर मैं companies को देख रही हूँ, there the implementation of the Sexual Harassment Act is very vital. ठीक है, तो in my previous association there was a huge MNC who has implemented it across their spaces, and Sexual Harassment Act is mandated, क्योंकि वहाँ पे internal committee बनना है, आपको वो process तो obviously पता है. So that is when we are talking, as your hashtag talks about gender gaps. So gender gaps में gender equality का जो parameter है, उसमें दूसरे issues आएंगे. GRB per se is not a private sector issue, because GRB is a public domain area, जो कि उसका जो प्रोसेस है ना, अगर मैं उसको, आपने और एक बात बोली थी रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ विमेन इन द गवर्नेंस एंड ऑल दैट, राइट? तो आप अगर डेटा देखोगे ना स्टेट्स के, क्योंकि वी वर डूइंग अ कंपैरेटिव एनालिसिस, वी फाउंड दैट जो लोअर लेवल में है ना, जो ग्राम पंचायत और इन सारे लेवल्स पे है, उसमें पार्टिसिपेशन विमेन का हायर है ना. लेकिन जब हम यूनियन लेवल में आ रहे हैं या स्टेट लेवल में आ रहे हैं, तो ऑटोमेटिकली वो घट जाता है. आप अगर, मतलब एक सिंपल एग्जांपल मैं यूज कर रही हूँ कि वी टॉक अबाउट मणिपुर एज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट, मतलब मणिपुर इज नोन फॉर द इमिग्रेंट्स, द वुमेन मार्केट एंड ऑल दैट, ठीक है, एंड दे आर सपोजिटली वेरी एम्पावर्ड एंड दे आर द फोररनर्स और लाइवलीहुड एंड एवरीथिंग. लेकिन अगर आप उनका वुमेन पार्टिसिपेशन इन लेजिस्लेशन देखोगे, वो बहुत ही लिमिटेड है ना. तो somewhere or the other, I'm not in a good position to judge it, because I don't know the data about it, because those studies have not been done. लेकिन we know वहाँ का जो mothers association है और ये सारे जो groups है, they are very strong, they are very vital. We know there was क्या नाम था उनका, जो अभी she was in fasting ना,
Shamairam.
Thank you. Sharmila, how she was not elected. तो हमने आपने वोट देना था ना, हमने आपने वोट नहीं दिया. तो what does that talk about? That ground level पे इस चीज पे अंडरस्टैंडिंग या इस चीज पे जो डिस्कशन होना है, वो भी लैकिंग है probably. या फिर हो सकता है कि they do not associate or they do not agree with what her take was. Probably, I don't know. मतलब मैं सिर्फ as an outsider, I am seeing that this person, such an exemplary, globally known, such a activist, when she fought for a position, she was not elected by the people. So, do you understand? वो gap जो है, वो कहीं ना कहीं हमको इंट्रोस्पेक्ट करना पड़ेगा कि हमने टेक कैसा लिया है. मतलब देयर, अगर मैं रिसेटलमेंट इश्यूज पे बात करूं, तो वहां पे आपको वी ऑल नो नर्मदा वाला जो इशू था, उसमें हमारी मेधा जी ने काफी काम किया है. लेकिन वहां पे जो लेवल पे जिनको, the affected party was not her, affected party was somebody else, right? Their need was not addressed finally, क्योंकि आपने जो भी आपका, मतलब whatever your upheaval was, personally you actually voiced it very crudely, and the judiciary did not agree with it, and they just raised the high. मतलब अगर मैं as an outsider, अगर मैं macro level पे चीज को देख रही हूँ, तो finally whatever your objective was for fighting for that is not met. Hence, when the POXO thing happened, they were told, क्या है वो, NAPM, they were asked not to enter that area. I have an academician friend who was studying that community at that point of time. So I have first-hand information of that area. कैसे उन्होंने उसको एड्रेस किया और क्या किया और whatever. So somewhere or the other, CSOs को भी ये समझना पड़ेगा कि आप कैसे एक इशू पे लेके बात कर रहे हो और क्यों बात कर रहे हो और उसको कैसे एड्रेस करोगे. Plus they'll have to have a long-term goal. मतलब आज बैठ के हम लोग डिस्कस कर रहे हैं और हमने एनजीओ फॉर्म कर दिया या हम जाके शुरू कर देते हैं. दैट इज वेरी इमेच्योर अप्रोच. तो अगर आपने कोई एक फॉर्म किया है और उसका जो आपका विजन मिशन है, दैट शुड बी रियली वेल थॉट आउट कि एग्जैक्टली आप वहां रीच करना चाह रहे हो. मतलब just imagine Govind ma'am has been working on this land rights issue for God knows how many years now, and there are few small successes, but what her goal was has still not been reached, what she had shared in the last presentation, I remember. So that's where the issue is. हम जहाँ पे भी ह्यूमन इंटरेक्शन पे बात करते हैं ना, वहाँ पे हमको किसी चीज पे रीच करने के लिए we'll have to have enormous patience, and we'll also have to have enormous understanding of strategizing कि कैसे छोटे छोटे चीजों को प्लस अप करते हुए हम आगे पहुंचेंगे. So I think affirmative action is very important. Governance पे women lower rank में बिल्कुल है, upper level तक नहीं पहुंच पाते because then the patriarchal dichotomy comes in and women are just ousted out basically. So plus probably जब उस level पे होते हो तो probably आप इतने attuned हो in your comfortable life, probably this my thought कि आप सोचते नहीं हो कि इसके लिए struggle करने के जरूरी है. Probably. So these are some of my thoughts on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it address?
Just for your 30 seconds. What policies are there? Monitoring is not happening.
Yeah.
And as you rightly pointed out, it's a very up shape. नीचे में है representation, ऊपर में नहीं है. ऊपर में नहीं है रिप्रेजेंटेशन, उसके कारण मॉनिटरिंग नहीं हो रही है, या मॉनिटरिंग को कैसे स्ट्रेंथन करें?
मॉनिटरिंग शुड बी इन एवरी लेवल आइडियली, है ना. तो अगर आप ग्राम पंचायत लेवल पे वो कर रहे हो तो वहां पे भी तो मॉनिटरिंग मैकेनिज्म बना हुआ है. अगर आप पंचायत 32nd 73rd एंड 74th को देखोगे, उसमें मॉनिटरिंग इज इनकॉर्पोरेटेड इन द पॉलिसी, राइट. लेकिन क्या वो लागू हो रहा है?
हम कैसे हो रहा है, मैं वही पूछ रहा हूँ कि कैसे उसको करें.
ठीक है, वो तो जो पैनल बना हुआ है, they have to have the accountability for it. मतलब हम और आप इस पे डिस्कस करेंगे तो उससे फायदा ज्यादातर होगा नहीं, इज माय अंडरस्टैंडिंग. लेकिन जो पैनल बना है और जो कमिटी के मेंबर्स हैं, they have to understand they are in a very very critical role and they have to implement it. अगर आपने एक पॉलिसी बनाया और वो आप लागू कर रहे हैं और वो इफेक्टिव है कि नहीं है उसको आपने मॉनिटर नहीं किया, so your role as a part of that monitoring committee is not served, है ना. तो हमारा जैसे परफॉर्मेंस अप्रेजल्स होते हैं कि भैया हमारे सारे पांचों चीजों को देखे जाते हैं कि 5 चीज पे आपने क्या काम किया, तो उनका भी वो होना चाहिए probably, and then they might get serious कि भैया हाँ इस पे भी हमको काम करना पड़ेगा. I'm just thinking aloud.
No, Indu sir can really go to court and enforce all these things.
Well. Yeah. I
Indu
think
sir keep doing it. Yes.
Yeah. I think I'll come to that. I think court is not an easy route. It's very tough. But Sanghamitra, there were some questions, and I suppose there is a friend who's been asking this, and I think I'll just put these questions to you. I'll just read out. I'll just read out to you. If the GRB is done using the top-down approach, the problem remains that the policy remains either confident of knowing everything what the society needs or ignorant of what the society needs. There must be continuous exchange of knowledge from the key stakeholders of society. Your thoughts on this, Dr. Dhar? Then the continuation further is a reflection. It appears on the face of it that the basis inherent in patriarchal structures of what a girl's role is seep into also how sometimes policies and schemes for women and girls, marginalized genders are planned. There appears a lack of diversity and imagining women and girls take on varied roles. I feel the need for more diversity in imagining girl women's roles. One question is, what is the way forward from here to do more GRB? Your suggestions, views, vision, recognizing large-scale domestic work by women, girls, and their unpaid labor. When and how will or can it come about? Because they are the largest unpaid workforce contributing already to the economy and social system, but their work is unpaid, unrecognized, and this lack of recognition also makes women and girls open to more forms of violence due to lack of financial security. So your views, response on that, and how can change in this aspect come about or be brought about? A personal comment in terms of the education literacy data in Kerala. While the data on literacy is not disputable, if one looks at social indicators or say freedom of mobility or of making choices, etc., it appears that Kerala is a caste patriarchal system too. So literacy alone may be a false mark to look at in context of Kerala to assess gender, just indicators in my view. Any comment on that, if any panelists would make or would appreciate? And then I think she mentions about, saw a video recently of a young mother from the UK who had chosen to raise a baby by herself and was also doing financial planning towards a home and a car. And it was interesting to hear her refer to a monthly account that is paid to her slash any parent in the UK towards childcare. And she spoke of how this payment was supporting her care for her babies, basic monthly needs, food, nappies, etc. In India, there is policy to support pregnant mothers, but perhaps there is a need for a long-term support program for young mothers, single mothers, so they can make choices and feel more authentic to them. With specific context, any views on this would also appreciate. And the point is, a last question is related to disability budgeting within GRB. Access to disabled, marginalized genders, any comments, views on that, if any, would appreciate. Well, so this anonymous person, surely I know who the anonymous person is. She's a dear friend. She doesn't want to be named, but it's okay. That's fine. But she has raised some very important questions, and over to you, Sanghamitra, for the answers.
Yeah.
And you can choose to answer so many questions.
Yeah.
It's like an article already.
Yeah. First one, what I understand was the top-down one, right?
Yeah.
I would just like to inform her that it is top-down, not entirely, because the policies come from the state. कि मतलब मेरे स्टेट में क्या कमी है या मैं अपने स्टेट प्लान में क्या डिसाइड कर रही हूँ, वो तो यूनियन में जाता है ना. और वो यूनियन में कैसे जाता है? जब स्टेट जब बना रहा होता है, आइडियली इट शुड कम फ्रॉम द ग्राम पंचायत. दैट इज द मैकेनिज्म. जो पूरा डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड मैकेनिज्म है, उसको एड्रेस करते हुए वो यूनियन आता है. और फिर यूनियन जब वो अप्रूव करता है, देन इट गेट्स मेनस्ट्रीम. So that way, it is not actually a top-down policy. CRB is not exactly a top-down policy. It's just the mechanism of implementation. Is the nodal is women and child in India, and they have mandated all the state governments. It is also not compulsory. तो इसीलिए इतना डिलेज होता है. मतलब आप सोचो कि 2005 में वो अडॉप्ट हुआ है यूनियन में, और मणिपुर ने आज एक्सेप्ट किया है 2020. which means there is a aspect of voluntary association. तो ये एक है, लेकिन GRB पर से नॉट टॉप डाउन, बिकॉज जो भी पॉलिसीज डिस्कस होती है या इम्प्लीमेंट होती है, they are ideally coming from the grassroots. That is what it should be. कि मतलब अगर आपने आज 100% वाला स्कीम बनाया है, तो there was a need for a cylinder in the rural area, तब तो जाके वो बना है ना. तो that kind of a scoping study has been done internally, and then उसके finding के basis पे state policies, state plans वो हुए थे, design हुए थे, और उसके basis पे वो फिर union में आया. So this is the tire through which it goes. So that way I would not say it is a top down. दूसरा आपका सवाल था about the Kerala one, I believe.
Yeah.
Kerala one, देखिए, Indians have a issue. किसी भी सक्सेस को ना सक्सेस नहीं देखते, उसपे सारे फेलियर्स को भी साथ में जोड़ते हैं. मैं उसको नहीं मानती हूँ. मैं मानती हूँ कि जो अच्छी चीज है उसको तो पहले बोलो, उसके बाद नेगेटिव्स को लाओ. तो मतलब agar education parameter is good, I acknowledge that. Additionally, and simultaneously, I also accept that there is a caste issue, there is a regional issue also. Kerala mein to region wise bhi काफी issues होते हैं. So those are there. Plus वहाँ पे और भी काफी सारे पैरामीटर्स है जिसपे वो बातें होती हैं. ट्रांसजेंडर वाला इशू है, सेक्सुअलिटी पे भी काफी सारे डिबेट्स हैं. So I'm not saying Kerala is the ideal place. I'm just giving an example कि अगर मैं educational parameter देखूं तो उसमें this state has performed really well and we should be acknowledging that. ये मेरा take है on that. आपने बहुत सारे सवाल पूछे थे. I'm missing out the rest of it. What was the third one? If I don't remember. Indu ji मुझे याद नहीं आ रहा.
Yeah, just 1 second. I think.
But sir, ma'am has also a bad throat, so if
Yes,
we can email to ma'am, yes.
थ्रोट का तो
Yeah, I think it was about disability and GRB,
देखिए, when we are talking about GRB, we are talking about pro women and 100% women, right? But in that, the disability element is innate in it. So women disabled and male disabled agar hai, so that they will not be outed out. They will be part and parcel of the discussion. However, because we do not have the disaggregated data, and even for that matter, disability data bhi hamare paas utna hardcore nahi hai, utna clear cut nahi hai. So that remains a question. However, whatever policies are made, it is always all encompassing. That is the nature of a policy, that they cannot actually keep some population out of it. That is what a policy should be. And thankfully in India, they have maintained that. But agar main recent example mein baat karu, how Poland is fighting on the abortion act, abortion rules. But India is already incorporated it long back. And we have an amendment also wherein in some cases abortion is allowed, is extended in the weeks also. The 24th tak bhi allowed hai, because until and unless health reasons it is allowed. So India in other aspects is very modern, and I feel it is very advanced and in a very different kind of a light, which is, this is something as we know, the ये जो सारा डिबेट होता है वेस्ट में, ये does not apply to India per se, लेकिन हम somehow or the other सबको we emulate West. So इसीलिए जैसे अभी अर्जुन ने बोला कि affirmative action वेस्ट का है लेकिन हम रिजर्वेशन बोलते हैं, तो मीनिंग मोर और लेस सेम ही है, लेकिन हम वर्ड्स पे वो करते हैं, and then we come out with those Hindi translations which are even more questionable, but however we do use that. So I don't think that is a challenge in GRB, because disability बोले या अगर आप ट्रांसजेंडर की बोले, अगर आप कोई भी दूसरा marginalized section की बात करें, they will be part and parcel of a GRB discussion, because it does not discriminate on gender aspect. Yeah.
Okay. I think
have I answered all of you?
Yeah, I think you have touched upon those questions as such, and I think I don't want to further prolong it because you are also not well, and I think you have made a brave effort of answering many questions. Just 2 points I want to just make, Sanghamitra. One was, I think you can choose to answer and not to answer. I think the point that Arjun was making about, say, GRB in the private sector, I see a point that you made that actually it's more to do with government and all. But today, when the private sectors in many countries are having more resources than the government itself, okay, the big corporations, we're talking some big corporations, who are rich and who got resources of many countries put together. So how is it? Because GRB is a tool which can be used at various levels, So if suppose there was a way to also use it in that sector,
Yeah.
What could that be? That was one. Two was, like I remember, we had a meeting way back in 2010. This is called by Sequin, and this was on vulnerabilities that women face and all. I'm bringing this important aspect here because we had this secretary WCD come in there for the validity function. And then she was talking about that, see, we have got umpteen number of schemes for women and all. And, we have been able to address so many problems for women. It being valedictory, but I somehow was compelled to still rise up and say, Madam, sorry to ask you this question. Is the valedictory? We don't ask questions in valedictory, but I'm forced to ask this question to you. You tell me one scheme which addresses homeless women in the country. 1 kilometer from here in Connaught Place, there are homeless women staying here without roof, without shelter. And is there any one scheme of Government of India or Delhi government which addresses them? So somewhere what happens is, that in the surfeit of some schemes and all, some of the Gandhi's last person that we talk about, they get left out. They get left over altogether, So maybe I think GRB is a tool which tries to pinpoint at those people, at those persons and all, and just maybe talking in terms of schemes may not be the answer, but how the schemes actually translate into actions and how the actions further come back into budgeting is, I think, the key to the entire work, And that's where I think the roles that you are playing are very significant, of highlighting this aspect. And, yeah.
Indu, currently, off the top of my mind, I can remember Swadhar Grah wala jo scheme hai na, that current wale mein, usme they are trying to rope in the deserted and homeless women. जो स्वधा गृह वाला जो स्कीम है आपको ध्यान होगा अभी recently has been implemented, so I think they will be part of that one. However, of course, उनके लिए अलग से जो आप बात कर रहे हो, definitely has not been, it needs to be done, and there's a huge gap on that because that population is also a pretty many number, but as I always repeat, there is no data, and that's why scheme का जब भी हम implement design करते हैं, until the data is there, you cannot actually substantiate your take on it. So as a CSO, probably other CSOs का एक collaborative team बने and they go for a hardcore census data on that, maybe state level पे ही करें, and then they find out that okay, this is the exact number of homeless and this is what we propose. I'm just thinking aloud. तो उस तरह से शायद हो सकता है कि CSO can get become a change agent and influencer to make a policy level change. तो homeless को ऐसे address कर सकते हैं. दूसरा आपने अभी जो raise किया, I'm forgetting the first one. What did you talk about?
Private sector.
Sorry, yeah. So उसमें actually, if you look at the current, sorry, yes. If you look at the current system, so GRB can be taken up as a PPP model, wherein जो CSR element है companies का, उसके अंतर्गत they can have a discussion on this, and then every private company can have a discussion on that, and they can form women related policies. Why I find it a little problematic is that companies are already guided by Companies Act and other acts. So उसके अंदर already ये सारे elements ideally होने चाहिए, है ना? Part A, Part B होना ही चाहिए. अगर वो नहीं है, then I think more than forming a GRB, you should actually form a monitoring body which should actually see कि भैया implement हुआ क्यों. So in current times, what I felt was the incorporation of the Sexual Harassment Act, which was very important, and more so during the COVID times, which is we are all working virtually, and there has been instances where government colleagues also they have faced harassment from colleagues because if whatever the reason, लेकिन उसको हम कैसे address करेंगे? Because when I am on a virtual medium and you have harassed me or I have harassed you, if it is not recorded, there is no proof to it. And if we two are talking, और आपने मुझे बोला और मैंने आपको बोला, so this is 1-to-1 हो गया ना, तो उसका फिर proof नहीं रहेगा, because आप अगर इंटरनल कमिटी में कंप्लेन करते भी हो तो then you have to provide witness and proof and everything, right? That is the mechanism of the sexual harassment policy and the internal committee. तो उसको कैसे एड्रेस किया जाए? I feel for the private sector this is more important because as the new normal has become virtual world, so we really need to tighten our belts on this aspect because lot many kind of harassments are happening virtually. So उसमें I feel it's not GLB related, it's actually gender equality related or inequality related. So private sector ka, in my understanding, it will be a PPP model, and under which we will have to have some specific sectoral interventions, and we can have a discussion on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Arjun and friends, you have anything to say, or we just close it now?
I think if Kelkar ma'am can have some concluding words, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. Govindji. Govindji, would you want to say something?
Yes, but ma'am, your video. Yes, please.
I don't know what to say after Sanghamitra has explained everything. The question is that I fully support her views.
Right.
And not because we come from the same organization at a different.
Sisterhood different wala sisterhood hai.
Yeah, but it is really because of certain commitment. Okay, commitment in terms of gender equality.
Yes.
I have a strong views on the state, not kind of thing that state is not serious in terms of dealing with women's question. Okay, that is one thing that we have to say this. Policies are made, but as a kind of ad hocism, they are not kind of implemented, and they know well they are not implemented. The only two policies that are implemented and they have made success in my terms is really Ujjwala scheme, and you know how it was kind of done. We are all familiar with, and I have done research also on that. And other is the Narega, on which partly I have done social audits, this and that. So when the government is serious, and it made a mark, I mean, it is known as the Narega, the public works policy internationally, that how it really brought out the kind of how it the poor dealing with the poverty, how well it was. So if the state is serious, it can do things. It is not really that they make this scheme, and we should not make an excuse that they are making policy, but something is happening. Of course, I recently I've been working for the last few years on social norms, particularly looking at the access to energy and land rights. And particularly, I became aware that where is the problem kind of comes, why land is seen as the male subject, which was not earlier the case because my mother inherited land and she was the landowner, and coming from the, and this is not only one example, there are various examples. So that would be the kind of thing. And unless you really improve two things, in my view, policies are not going to be successful, not implemented. The policy is successful only when it is implemented, and these are the two cases. When the economic rights are given to the people, whether they are the Dalits, they are indigenous people, or they are women. Okay, this is the kind of thing that is one has to deal. Violence against them won't stop. The violence against women, violence against Dalits, violence against indigenous people, which still is hidden because they are somewhere in the corner, so they are not mainstream. Women are the most mainstreamed in terms of the facing the kind of violence within home and outside home. Okay, that would be
There's an inverse relationship. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. This is the kind of this really shows us that the complexity of the problem. So that has to be seen in this. And unless the second point is, unless the social norms change, policies are also not going to work. And social norms have been changing. It is not that something we have not done. The state passed Hindu Succession Amendment Act. It passed Violence Against Women Act. What that? Yeah, and it is that when the violence is there against the woman, she has the right to live in that house. And when this policy was passed, then there was a kind of attack on uniform. At that time, it was uniform in 2005. And they were saying that this is the uniform is advising the government, and that's why they are doing it. But the question was that the women and the children have the right to live in the house. Why this law is not being passed? Why there is so much violence and so much is happening? And why these acts are not implemented? So these are some of the things. And these norms also, we need to do more work on masculinity. Why these masculine norms are there? Because they are not only in India, they are in other places also. That is what. But other places also had kind of some changes, and the changes we can see our neighboring countries. One is Bangladesh, another is China. And not that they have solved entirely the problem, but they have solved the problem to a large extent. Work participation, China has solved the problem, but still decision making is still continues to be, because of my research and PhD work on China, I continue to refer to China, not because comparing that as kind of thing. And Bangladesh comes as a surprise to all of us, kind of thing. How at least developed countries have come so well now economically and socially. And women's leadership. That also has to be said, which was seen, oh, women can't run and can't do this. So I think I'm not saying that it has to be only women's leadership, but women need to be in adequate number and proportionate number in their leadership position. Look at the prejudices come in our legislators when the bill is introduced for the reservation of women in the parliament. How the what happens, what commotion happens, and that really reflects what kind of mindsets we have. So these are some these thoughts. I think I would like to once again congratulate Sanghamitra, and very good discussion. And Arjun, very much for your open kind of questions, because these questions keep bothering us, but we don't open up thinking that, oh, what we will think about it. Unless we raise the questions, and all questions are important, we will not really get answers ourselves and others also. Thank you very much, Sanghamitra. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Yes, ma'am. Next time, reservation in private sector. Please be prepared. Yes, we will discuss that, because that sector can really make some mark, especially. Yes.
Incidentally, IT sector is much better in reservation. I mean, they don't call it reservation, but in the employment of the women.
And that is why I said affirmative action. Reservation have many negative connotation in our country.
Yes, it is just a lip service when they say we are an equal opportunity employer.
Exactly.
Even Martin sir said that we need to shun the in political reservation for Dalits, because it is not leading to anything. So where it will lead to anything in the representation. Anyhow.
Arjun,
yes.
Lakshmi and Saraswati, but we don't
Yeah.
any resources to control and any education.
Yes. Totally. Kali Puja is coming. Sanghamitra ma'am is Calcutta. So yes,
yesterday we had Lakshmi Puja.
You missed really.
Kal hua hai. Lakshmi Puja yahan pe.
Okay.
After that, we close the doors.
Thank you. It was really interesting. And thank you so much.
Propose a vote of thanks officially. Yes. Indu sir, please. Indu sir, your mic. Please unmute. Yes.
Yeah. I want to thank Sanghamitra, Dr. Sanghamitra, for this amazing presentation. I think you spoke very briefly and you gave ample room for discussion. I think so. A good session is where we have got more discussion. So I think you allowed more discussion, and I think that opened up areas for people's learning. And I would thank Arjun, Simi, and Professor Govind Kelkar for joining us here, and the participants who wrote questions and who made some very important points also. Well, friends, I think we've had some very fascinating discussion today. And Dr. Sanghamitra Dhar, in fact, apologies to you that we persisted despite your cough. We should have allowed you to rest, but somehow, I don't know, the discussion was such that, you also went on answering, and Sorry if we caused you any trouble for that.
No problem. I had
Okay.
enough resource here, so I
Lovely,
was
lovely,
having
lovely.
that.
So that at least you take the guilt away from us. But
Yes,
please
totally.
stay healthy, be healthy, prayers for your good health. And
Thank
friends
you,
will come back
thank you.
again for another round of discussion on gender gaps. Zindabad.
And,
Thanks a lot.
yeah,
Thank you,
and
thank you.
thank you to Arjun, thank you to Simi, thank you to Professor Govind, and to Dr. Indu for this invitation and this discussion. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Thank you.
It
Have a
was
nice day.
very enriching. Thank you. Have a
Thank
very
you,
good
thank
day.
you.
Bye bye.